So, how's everyone doing? Tip top. So, we had some discussion on what the topic should be, but as we have recently, within the last 2 weeks anyway, started this new approach to an introduction to MDriven, to like a learning package that our newest member Philip is the first guinea pig on. So what we want to do and what we called it was 1,000 steps to MDriven, and Lars think that 1,000 steps will disqualify any millennial from actually starting it.
Actually, Dennis or Alexandra who said that's very scary. 1,000 steps?
Yeah, so it might not be a good name. Let's see. But the basic idea was to very piecemeal start from the very beginning and not explain everything in the deepest detail, just moving on all the time, trying to push on and learn one more thing, because at some point, maybe after 100 or 200 steps, you will know enough of the handicraft to actually start to talk and express yourself with the tools. So that's the main part, and I think that most of our other videos has been very focused on a single function and sort of assume that you knew the other functions, and so that has made it hard to find a good way into the product. We think that's what we speculate on anyway. So to share my screen to actually show you what I'm talking about. So how it looks is pretty much something like this. So we're not sure it's going to be 1,000 steps, but thinking ahead, there will be quite a few steps, because once you have gone through a sort of happy path from knowing nothing to actually producing web applications, there's lots of side tracks that one can talk about quite some time, and we probably should do that as well, to so that once you meet your first customer or client, you you might not be fluent in everything, but at least you know that things exist, and you know where to start looking to find things. Is that a fair description, Lars?
Yes, it is. And I mean, I would say you, more than others, have been trying every way to teach, and it's not easy. And I guess everyone needs it. But when we talked and came up with this, it's like we lack the ability to teach without thinking, and maybe you just need to do, not get the whole theological reasons for modeling, and just get to it. And then we thought maybe super small steps. So that's why there's so many, because they're very tiny steps. I don't think we can hear you, Derek, if you're trying to say something. I'm just saying.
No, sorry, I was talking to myself really. But as soon as I saw the 1,000 steps and I saw what the sort of steps were, I thought baby steps. It's 1,000 baby steps, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're very, very small. It's just what, click and do this, click and do that. But it seems like we are we need to also, it's a bit actually to not scare away, but to weed out those who are not willing to walk the path, maybe. And not weeding out in a bad way, but I mean, some things might, if you want to get into the tool all the way, or at least be able to produce something that gives real results, you need to learn the hows and how to click, and maybe that has been lacking. Let's see if this works.
And in the end, we can't shy away from building information systems for real life is a bit complicated, because real life is complicated. So, and we need to also accept that it's not for everyone, but the ones that has the ability should at least be able to find that out fairly easy how to do it. So it shouldn't be a mystery on how the thing works. And the great thing about having it documented in baby steps is that once you're on your merry way and far beyond it, you might still want to go back and check a specific thing at a later date. So, and all the steps are accompanied by a video. So hi and welcome to MDriven. It's me talking basically, but trying to show every single thing we do. And the way I produce this is that I sort of write the steps as they feel natural to me, but as I do, I might be skimming over things or neglecting to explain important things. So I'm very interested in getting some kind of feedback from those of you who knows the tool but still checks this out to see if there's things that we can improve. Not necessarily that we're going to redo a lot of the steps, but we could do add-ons to this, like sidetracks to go deeper into things that might be complicated.
I just wanted to jump in since we have Philip joining. I mean, he's a teacher and he's actually getting started with MDriven. How have you found it so far, Philip? Do you like the format, or like how does it feel for you so far?
Like he's gonna say that he didn't like it? No.
I know, but that means the experience.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when I teach, so for instance, I'm a social science teacher. I teach history, religion, and stuff. I start with small steps all of the time. So, for instance, today I was teaching my 9th graders, like the story how World War I happened, and that's a complicated story. And you have to start small, and you have to build all of the steps, and then in the end you have to compile it into the big picture. So how this is designed at the moment is like I'm teaching. So for me it's kind of easy because I can see the big picture in the end, but I can see the small steps that you need to know beforehand.
Good to hear, Philip, and you're doing really great so far. Hope you stick to it.
I will, and thank you.
And also, there's always a challenge what the path should be. Now we started with the modeling and just handling the tool, adding classes and dragging on associations. And why we do that is because when we have been in a classroom earlier, that's not really an extremely simple thing for people trying the tool for the first time. quite a few have managed to create an association to self and not finding it, and getting a lot of errors, and not understanding how to delete it. So that's why we put some effort into those first steps to just being able to get out of trouble, and also know how the mechanics work, the separation of the model as a repository with all the classes versus the diagrams that only show part of what's in the model. So now we are at step like 150 or something like that, and I think it's good that we're already running a web application and adding or changing the seeker forms to do some more complex seeking than they came with initially. So I'm very happy that we're able to, even though we take extremely small steps, we cover ground. So that's also the main objective with this.
Hans, are you focused on or prioritizing declarative programming style versus iterative?
Yes, so that's always our mission, to highlight the benefits of declarative and functional programming styles rather than imperative. And if you look at the development of C#, they do the same thing. They push link and expressions in C# rather than doing iterative approaches, and that's for a reason. The reason is that it's more readable, and it's less error prone, since variables in those kind of loops doesn't change or doesn't change data in the same way as normal iterative programming styles do. And
so and as I look or consider, I don't know Philip's background obviously, but my guess is that if you come from a less traditional programming background like some of us, that declarative would be a very powerful technology shift. They may not even really be aware of the power and the value of it.
No,
I think the problem we've had for many years is that we don't get people to stay long enough to hear that argument. So I think part of what Hans is doing here is just pointing to how small steps you can take, and quite quickly you get something out that you can actually shape. And then they might be ready for seeing how did this happen. Because when we start with the reason how it's good, there's like, well, what's in it for me then? I mean, it's they don't stay around and long enough to listen
to see the
to your
fruit.
argument.
But also probably a more experienced or an older programmer like myself, we it's almost a comfort level is doing iterative work because it's what we've always done, right?
Yeah, it was, and to be fair, there's what's the saying? There's many ways to skin a cat, and they might all be good. That's not the issue here. It's just to if you do it this way, our belief is that it's more maintainable in the end. But that's not something that's really sexy that you can sell to someone starting out, because they just want to see things happen, and maintenance is the furthest from their that's not top of mind, because they think that, well, this is a one-off, this just is a small thing, as everything starts as a small thing, and then 2 years later you notice that you need to check some old stuff, and you can't imagine who did this because it doesn't follow any style that you're familiar with, and then you check in comments and find out it was you, and so that's the big problem. What we have found, and what I especially have found fascinating turning to this style of development, is I can service like 3 or 4 customers over a period of time, and I don't really have to hold stuff in memory especially much. It's always beneficial to be able to remember stuff, but it's not that crucial to remember how things work because it's readable. And code...
And that speaks to your book, right? You talk about the software requirements being the code, which is a brilliant paradigm shift that I think the industry probably struggles with. You know better than me, but it's absolutely correct that if the code is readable by a third party, that is the requirement.
Yeah, and that also alludes to the issues that we have with a lot of our competition with low-code tools, because even if they produce a result equally fast, the stuff that they have produced isn't necessarily maintainable and isn't necessarily readable, and then it isn't necessarily the requirements that went into the product. It's just the reaction to the requirements, and it's always hard to try to deduce what the requirement was once you only see the result. So as if you can keep as much as possible of the requirements in the solution, that's a much better fit for explaining to why we did it this way.
So probably a UML model is a golden example of declarative programming style.
Yeah, definitely. So and being said that it's also important to use the language of the domain that you're modeling, because I've seen examples of models that they model something very very real and concrete, but they still turn it into extremely technical words and doesn't really use the terminology of the language they talk in the specification. So it's possible to be to abuse a model as well, of course. So that's since it's universal, you can do anything. You can even do bad things.
So one of the things that I found interesting is if you go back to when we were first taught about object-oriented programming, and then you consider that against what we do with modeling, I think one of the things that a disconnect there, if I can call it that, is the ideas of abstraction and inheritance. That we don't, because we're modeling as we go, we don't recognize ahead of time that, oh, this really could be an abstract class that could be used by or inherited by 5 other classes. And that's I don't know if that's also a weakness of traditional object-oriented programming without a model, but I do think that you can't use some of those more powerful tools of object-oriented programming unless you already understand the problem space. It's like you already have to have the solution before you can build the solution.
Yeah, and there are very few, even among the low-code tools, that actually manage the concept of an association and relation. They have lists and they have pointers to stuff, but as it's obvious, if you remove something from not being associated to this object anymore, then it's removed from the list in both ends. And that's not the case if you just keep lists of things. You need to remember to remove it from that list and not being the single pointer to that, that's a lot of work to actually get it. There's really only one solution. There's no need to do this because everyone knows that this is the way it goes if you're using the model as if it and the object orientation as it were physical objects, because things can only be in one place at a time, at least if that's what you have set.
And that's before you get into the idea of a composite association.
Yeah, so, but they still follow the rules of the model. But as soon as you do, let's say C#, and you have a master object that points out detailed rows. Of course, the master object has a list that points out the detailed rows. And also the detailed rows objects that you put in the list most likely has a field value that points back to the master. And it's totally okay in C# to put one of these rows into another master list and still letting it point back to the wrong master, the old master. And that's, well, I would say 30% of all the strange bugs that are hard to find come from not following the basic physics of object orientation. So, and why doesn't people follow the basic physics of object orientation? Well, it's hard to say, but mainly because they forget, or they want to cut corners, or maybe I don't need to do it the right way this time. Maybe this time is the first time in the universe when I can go beyond physics. So, and that's the I think main driver of complexity with software. It's not that it doesn't follow physics. It does follow physics, and if you ensure that it does and make it almost impossible to not follow physics, everything falls out so much easier and is so much easier to talk about and so much easier to understand.
Which all comes along as a free ride with a UML model.
Yeah. So then you have, it's impossible to draw that idiotic pointer that doesn't, then you really have to work. Then you really have to state that there is a separate pointer that points to another master that's two associations, and that is fine too.
Good question. Why isn't there even in C# some kind of way to just tell that this is
this is a double maintained.
This is a list that is one there and there, and then it's like connected. Or I mean, because there's no scenario where you want really to break that route, because that will only cause a crash. But I don't know why we as developer community don't tackle those things, these basic things that makes everything wrong. I mean, the garbage collector is very nice to have, although it comes with some oddities, but still. So there have been many solutions, but that's one good example, Hans.
Yeah. So
why wouldn't one want that?
And that always come at the framework level. So you have the language that makes it possible to break the laws of physics for object orientation and be happy about that. Then you should have a framework. But frameworks are not necessarily geared to help you in every way like this. And the reason behind not using a framework is often that you get a package of you get overage, you get a lot of stuff that you don't want, and maybe you're afraid that you're gonna lose clock cycles in doing things the complex way, and maybe it will be faster if you do it. But as soon as you have even thought about maybe this is faster, then you have lost more clock cycles than what you can do pretty bad things as long as you're not ordo n log n or as long as you don't do NP complete problems. Most everything is forgiven on a modern CPU, and it's easy to find the bottlenecks once you have the large data sets. And then, so as we worked, my mentor said that first you make it work, then you make it fast, and I think that's important.
Well, today's CPUs are so forgiving, right? Back when we were writing code for 8 or 16-bit CPUs, you did something stupid, you knew immediately.
Yeah.
You had to use good style or things just didn't work.
No.
I'm thinking, I don't just, I have two things that I wanted to bring up today. Well, let's take the one where I can just inform you first then maybe. That I've been working on performance things. So, there might be residual problems from that in the latest versions. But on the other hand, there should be also substantial, hopefully, performance improvements, and we will continue working on the MDriven server and the turnkey servers, both memory use and general snappiness. But then and there are new views in the MDriven server, for example, to see what's going on a little bit. There will be more work on this. But I'm thinking, I think it's Damien and Derek in this group, like not maybe using MDriven server or turnkey servers yet, or so maybe
I
not
will be making the shift by the end of the year, or Hans will hunt me down and beat me.
Yeah, well, so I'm just because we also talked, Hans, you and I, about the complex, the maze that is the .NET versions, the framework and what they call standard, which they say is a definition, and core, and how to host websites going forward. And it would be a huge win, I think, if we could simplify, as you point out, Hans, to move to core, to only have core really for at least. I'm not sure how that will impact other work, and if it will impact the framework itself, or if it's mainly impacting the servers. At least they will be easier to debug, to work on, and it will hopefully shrink the horrible build situation that is complicated to build the same things for so many different scenarios. I mean, all the way from basically a phone to the .NET standard framework thing. So what do you?
Yeah, what's the choice of tool for everyone? Is everyone in Visual Studio 2022, or are we lagging?
Still 2019, mostly out of laziness.
So
now the Git client is acting up, so I'll have to move on.
Yeah, so 2022 is what's good. It's 64-bit, so it's you can do more things, I guess. But what has shifted in the APIs for doing the plugins for Visual Studio, that since it was 64-bit, they restructured and threw away, and so we can't compile the same thing. And what we did with the VS 2022 was to shift to another installer for that. So it's the standard VSIX extension for installing plugins into Visual Studio, and I think it's better for us in many ways, leaving a lot of old build scripts behind that we have improved from like Visual Studio 2008 to now then 2019, but it's time for them to die, I think.
far as my story, I am using 22. I migrated most of my stuff to .NET Standard, and then I'm progressively going into Core. Of course, obviously, .NET Standard is only can't cover all the UI stuff, but so I'm migrating to Core. As for Turnkey, yeah, I think I've been meaning to get into the Turnkey world and away from the SQL Server world, really, I suppose. But I've got a lot of legacy stuff there, of course. But I don't know. Maybe maybe going through the baby steps will be the push I need.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, well, I'm on the MDriven framework still, mostly using OCL to dig stuff out of the database. I don't have a user interface, really. It's a web API server, so I mostly ship things to the clients as JSON. So I have my business objects as a UML model and all the worker classes and stuff that's just, well, regular object-oriented C#. I didn't want to litter the MDriven world with a tool to create SVG text out of a bunch of database objects.
And so just for your information, there's a 22 version that's fully operational, as we say in Star Wars. And so go ahead then and migrate your project over when you're ready, and that will be good for you. And then you can pull all the MDriven stuff from NuGet to get and choose when to upgrade versions, etc. So I think that's good.
I'm on .NET 4.7.2 or something right now, but I'm looking at .NET 6.
Yeah, because they're moving fast now on the .NET track. .NET 5 fell out of maintenance mode, and that's what we compile stuff on currently. So we're going to move it up to .NET 6. But as Microsoft state this, they are going to keep the legacy stuff, the framework 4.8 or something like that. It seems like they're going to keep that for a long period of time. But on the core side of things, it will move faster with smaller steps.
Yeah, though some versions will be some kind of long-term support. I think even version numbers will be supported for a longer time than odd versions or something like that.
Yeah.
That's why I'm looking at .NET 6 and .NET 5.
Yes.
Even though .NET 7 might be around the corner, I think that will go out of support fairly soon, while .NET 6 will be supported for a bit longer. And, well, not that it's very hard to upgrade, but...
Yeah.
If you're, I mean, most of our customers shouldn't really have to care about these tech details. That's one of the points of using modeled systems, right? That you don't actually have to care about these things. But you as the techies more and closer, we want to tell you what's going on, because there will be some upgrade probably anyway. And even if you run stuff on IIS, there is a shifting world into maybe containerizing and running it on different operating systems. So who knows what's coming. But one of the reasons also that we are, I'm partly going back to performance, because it's related. If you want to containerize and scale up, either through containers or Azure, for example, you want I lost my train of thought. Oh, that just went.
Well, there's better memory management in .NET 5.6, so they have done a lot of improvement on .NET framework since they switched over from relying on internet information server to manage all the whole full stack themselves.
I think my point was that, so in this work with performance, we're also trying out scaling the app more. So there's work going on scaling. What if you have one MDriven server and 50 front ends? How do you set that up? So I think there will be wiki articles on, for example, Azure scaling, and how do you make an application global by using what Microsoft's called the front door, and how do you put up application gateways in front of your application maybe, and how do you do log collection on Azure if you have many front ends that are scaling up and down? How do you differentiate the different instances running? And just we try to create a path for you to walk when it comes to these things. There's also an interesting feature, we might have mentioned it before, but if you scale over big distances, you can run a slave server in a different geographical region that has basically a huge cache. So you can get better client speed far away. I don't know, I don't think we have anyone here, right, doing very large scale installations that span the globe. But we have especially one customer, this SciFree, that are going to have an application that needs to be globally available next year. So there will be some work done onto how to provide a path for you to walk on how to scale your applications if you have tens of thousands of simultaneous users over around the planet.
Yeah, and equally for the MDriven server, which is a singleton as it runs the periodic actions and things, it won't be any it won't be sane to run it in parallel, but still customers want to have a hot swap and a failover. So we are gonna do things in the MDriven server in order to help it to know if it is the hot one or not. So it knows if it should relax and just not do the periodic actions on this node, or if it actually is the hot one and is the one that is supposed to do the periodic actions. And we want to get some automation into this to be able to detect in the load balancer who's getting serviced. So that's all good. Scaling out and helping customers with the slightly different needs than the traditional, where we have been a lot enterprise need, in-house needs.
Yeah, it's coming also, by the way. I'm going to do work on warming up, the server warm up features to prepare for load to arrive, and it might go into to be able to have some kind of API for a load balancer to talk to, but that's, I don't know, but at least we're going to do warm up features so that hopefully a load balancer can find out when a new server is ready to go with new clients. So there won't be a delay on servicing new clients when a new server has spun up in a container or as part of a scale set on Azure.
Good. So going back to the 1,000 steps, as we progress through that, and we are now on seekers and document forms that has started from auto forms, but we then adopt. One option is to fairly immediately switch into this with placing containers and doing responsive UI, or we should save that to a bit later on and focus more on the logic of any application and what we want to do with it. I haven't decided on which route is best to go. Speaking of the placing containers, we have got some feedback about the name.
We have a vote.
Yeah, so
we have a vote.
Yeah, so we had a vote about the naming. Placing containers can be sort of the name container is quite often associated with infrastructure stuff, like and placing container, it might not even be any good English, but then so we had put out a vote internally for a few attendees, and as expected, it ended up all over the place and no consensus whatsoever. So then I thought back to when I did Macintosh development in the late 90s or mid 90s. They never cared much about naming, did they? They could name a thing the most stupidest way you can imagine, and they got away with it because, well, it's a name. So mainly I'm thinking of their network protocol, Apple Talk. What the hell is that? Apple's talking. So how could they get away with that? If they could get away with Apple Talk, I think we could get away with placing container.
But before you tell this, should we get some feedback? What I mean,
okay, now
we have
I already
some.
Killed it.
Yeah, you already killed it. But if we have, like, is it at least 2 English speakers here, native English speakers, right? So what do you think?
Oh, Derek, you're mute.
What's the question?
So you want a generic term for the placing container concept, really?
Yeah, if we need a new name, or if it's if it can fly as is, or if it's extremely confusing and we really should stop. What do you say? Cease and stop and
Cease and desist.
Cease and desist.
Are you using the name placing containers, or is it an acceptable term for what you've heard previously?
I don't know. Layout widget.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've had thousands of weird and wonderful suggestions. I mean, at least placing containers, I hear the objection to the word container because it's very it is generic and used across a lot of industries. But at least I've never heard the term placing container in the concept of a layout widget, if you will, and so therefore it is, to my mind, pretty unique. So if somebody mentions placing containers, first thing I'll think about is your placing container.
Yeah, because that's a fair point, that it doesn't necessarily need to be a descriptive word. It just needs to be a word that is consistent over time too.
It's basically some kind of similar to Flexbox. That's what it mimics, but we can't use Flexbox because then we don't have any freedom to. But maybe it should be something else. Placing flexi place.
Well,
I'm thinking about it from since we're talking about UI, I'm thinking about it from a photographer's perspective. That's my hobby, and I'm thinking of like a view, but view is a poorly used term. The word photograph kind of makes me think because it's a snapshot. I don't know. Those are the terms that are coming to my head.
In the web world, they would call it a frame, I suppose. But
yeah. So
right. Yeah.
Thinking about
Image.
naming, it's interesting to also reflect over Visual Studio, because everything there is from like the movie industry, isn't it? It's Visual Studio, and then there's lots of things, I can't remember them now, but I know we had this discussion a few years back about, and that's mainly why the first version of the MDriven Designer was called Gaffer, because that's a role in film industry. But then we had this British guy, and he said Gaffer, that's like an angry boss, and you don't want it to be called that. And
What about using the movie term a set?
yeah,
Things that are on set and not on set.
But this is something that holds a lot of controls and stuff, and it's about building a tree structure or something, a hierarchy of flexible stuff.
Materialska.
Can I interject?
Yeah, but that
yes, welcome Philip.
Thank you. I'm just thinking, from a teaching point of view, it should be quite simple to understand when you look at it, and depending on the sub menu, like I like this placing objects because it tells you what to do, so it's very simple to know. And when you you're working, you want to, all right, oh yeah, I need to place my objects and stuff like that. So it should be as simple as possible, the name.
Good point. Yeah, as you notice, there's still really no consensus, and I think there will never be. What's this? There's this famous saying: if you ask people what they want, was it Henry Ford that said, if you ask people what they want, they would only ask for faster horses. So that's a problem. You need to sort of, this is Apple talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, we will take this under advisement, I guess.
I just wanted to say that, there was mainly, like, overall, from the feedback that you received so far, I know that it's 1 or 2 people that have requested it. So I think, given that it's not that big of a deal, but it creates this division, it's maybe not even worth, like, we can just leave it. And, like, that's what everyone has been using up till now, and it will confuse people less than changing it for the ones that haven't said anything. So it might just be easier to leave.
Good point. Cool.
Yeah, well, a division, if that was the term, nicely abbreviates to a div. So that might be convenient.
Yeah.
Henry Ford also said you can have any color you want as long as it's black.
Yeah,
so why don't you just
Yeah,
give us what
exactly.
Not much of a style guy.
No, but basically it means you decide.
Yeah.
We'll get used to it.
Yeah, and it's so Johan's point to just carry on and deal with it. It's sort of good from the standpoint that we don't need to go back and revise what we have said so far. So that's worth something also.
I don't think we should change it if it isn't some obvious thing.
Yeah.
So that's outrageously bad with it.
Yeah.
Because then we have to redo a lot of things.
Yeah.
So it's not that.
Like
much
when
of
they come up with names for car models and they find out that on this market it means something really ugly and they need to maybe revise it on that market.
I guess you're only going to talk about rows and columns anyway, because you're not going to talk about, I'm using this placing container row here when you start to use it. It's just now in the beginning maybe.
Yeah.
That we think about the naming.
Yes, good point. And also what we have got feedback on, which I think we will implement, is the ability to put a name on each row like this or container like this, so that there would be a more easy way to express, no, not that row, the row in the row in the row. So if the developer is able to explicitly say that, no, the center part, which one is that? The one that's called center part. Okay, then it's much easier to, and then you don't need to rely on the class name. You can give it your own applied name per view.
Yeah,
Like
that
the view
should
model.
probably make it easy to find things too. I mean, then you could have a search feature where you can start typing your name and you get something highlighted, and that's the right container.
Yeah. So that might
Didn't
be
you
a
say, Hans, that
Sloppier with your naming and just use what works for you as a developer rather than having to think about the domain objects and the more formal stuff.
Yeah, because you normally in a Word document you always talk about footer and or footer or header, and that you don't have a name for the things in the middle, but it would be good to be able to name these sections yourself, I think.
Yeah.
And then I guess it would also, I don't know exactly how, but if that would bleed through into the HTML or into the browser, it would make it much easier to point back to a problem.
Yeah, correct. Good point. Yeah. So that's probably the way to go. Not get stuck on the name for the thing, but be able to give it unique names where it is applied. Good.
Yeah.
That's good.
So, just what do you think, Fanny?
So cold out. No, I haven't actually tried the placing container yet, so I have no opinion whatsoever. But I think it makes sense what you're saying. Just want to see if I'm awake, right?
Yeah, good. So I think we covered the stuff that we want to say. If there's any feedback in using the steps, don't be afraid to use the steps even if you know everything already. It will help us to if you discover that is that really so? Didn't he say that wrong? Or something like that? Or why doesn't he mention this while he's mentioning that? So there might be things that will be good feedback for follow-up sessions to make this course complete. And we actually have a new pupil. What is it called? Yeah, pupil. So someone who's going to take the course, and it's a 15-year-old guy doing high school, and so he's the son of Christina. So he's doing prao in his school, and his job is to do the course and do feedback for us. We'll see if he gets something going, then it's a great course, and if it doesn't, then we will get some feedback.
That prao thing is a very Swedish occurrence, a kind of a very short time internship, perhaps you could describe it as.
Yeah.
Usually a single week, just to get some real life work experience while still in school.
I thought it was for the teachers to get some time off, but maybe you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
As
that
a
too,
teacher,
maybe.
for me, it's a week off.
Yeah, I'm good. You just call it week
I've
off.
had my oldest daughter working at our business here and using my software system, and it's been a very strange experience.
Yeah.
She's been quite capable with it, which is a good sign, but
Yeah.
it's strange.
Yeah. she pushes buttons that you didn't know exist, or?
Yeah. Well, what's shocking to me actually is how easily she just uses it. I put it down to the age gap, but maybe it's also good software. I don't know.
Must be.
So the 1,000 steps are accessible off the MDriven site, presumably somewhere.
Yeah, on the wiki.mdriven.se. And speaking to that, Johan, we are in the process of redoing the main site as well. So we will see that in the coming time periods.
Yes, we're hopefully at the, I know Dennis is working on it at the moment, so hopefully we'll have a new branding and we'll reach out to you too for feedback, trying to see how we stay up to date. So any feedback is welcome. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, and then we will be better when we get this kind of feedback that it might be hard to find something. Please shoot that back, because then we will make it easier to find something, the thing. Yeah. But on the wiki, you just type in 1,000 as numbers and you will find it.
Well, I will have a look. I mean, I'm using a very small part of MDriven quite extensively, but the bigger picture I don't really grasp. So it's going to be interesting, I think.
Good. Well, we used up the time. Thank you so very much for showing up tonight. I hope to see you in 2 weeks, and have fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You too.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Hans. Thank you, Lars.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.